tell you a little bit about how I got into this practice area. I started out, I've been practicing 9 years. My first 4 years were primarily in commercial litigation, which I still do some of that, but we have a transactional, I'll call it, elder law department that does the drafting of powers of attorney, living wills, healthcare surrogates, and they do uncontested guardianships. And I'm going to talk a lot today about guardianships. But they kept running down to me because they aren't trial lawyers saying, we've got 2 siblings that are fighting over who's going to care for mom and dad. We don't want to get involved in this trial work. Will you do it? So I said, well, yep, you just got to teach me about the guardianship statutes, teach me about trusts and what I need to know, and I'd love to do it. So I started doing that. It's been about 5-6 years at this point, and I found it so much more rewarding because I get to help families that are truly in crisis. Elder exploitation is unbelievably on the rise. My practice now is about 95% focused on that and only about 5% in commercial litigation. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about my 3 practice areas, which is the guardianship litigation, probate, and trust litigation. I'm going to focus more on the guardianship side and talk to you about how to plan for the unfortunate time when if you are ever cognitively decline or have incapacity, how you can plan for that and make sure you guide your children and family members as to what you want to happen, how you can, in doing that, sometimes avoid a guardianship. Sometimes it can't be avoided, and if it can't be avoided, I want to talk to you about how you can make sure the person you want to be appointed your guardian, or try to ensure that you have the best shot of them being appointed your guardian. I'm going to give you a couple stories. Obviously, I'm going to not tell you the names of the individuals, but just to give you an example, and a lot of times it's when a spouse has passed away, and after that you'll see sometimes more of a cognitive decline if somebody has already been in early stages of Alzheimer's or dementia. But I had a gentleman referred to my office. He was 92 years old. It was John Smith. So John comes in, he shows up, and I go out in the lobby. And I talked to him only a couple minutes on the phone. He had told me that his wife had passed away. He was mad at his kids. He had 3 kids, and he wanted to come tell me about it. So I said, okay. So I walk out in the lobby, and he's out there, and I walk out, and there's this mid-40s woman sitting next to him. And I said, John, he introduces me to Sally, and I said, okay, well, what's Sally doing here? Oh, this is my girlfriend. Okay. I said, well, John, I'd prefer to meet with you alone. So Sally, take a seat. So we go back, and I start talking to John, and John told me about his wife passing, and they had been married, 55 years, I think. And he was clearly heartbroken. And, the more I talked to him, what I've learned in doing this now for this amount of time, you can have a conversation with somebody for 5 to 10 minutes, and you may think that there is no cognitive issues. But if you start to really talk to somebody for 30, 45 minutes, you start to notice that they're repeating themselves. They're, especially for highly intelligent people, he was high up in a major company, kind of deflecting, talking about something else that they feel comfortable in. So I started to get some concern about that, but the reason he had come to me is his kids had filed a guardianship. And he said, I don't think I need a guardian, and I explained the process, which I'll explain to you in a moment. And I said, well, I'll be happy to represent you. At the end of the day, my job is to tell the court what you want, but ultimately the court's going to try to do what they think is in your best interest. Well, what had happened is this woman had come in and he'd started spending a whole lot of money on her, and he had almost $1 million. At his access. And his kids had come in and they had a power of attorney, and they were trying to, or one of them did, they were trying to stop this. They were trying to say, look, let us just manage your money. We'll give you some money to go have, fun, but, help us here. But he wouldn't listen. So he told me, he said, I don't want to marry her. I said, well, that's good. He said, I just want to spend time with her. I said, look, I'm just here to protect you. You come see me anytime you want. The guardianship process can take months. I'm here for you. Well, the guardianship court had put into place, before I got involved, a court order that he couldn't get married until the incapacity had been determined, because there was concern he would do that. He called me over the next 3 weeks from 3 different counties demanding that I allow him to get married because they had told him there's a court order he couldn't get married. Well, she was taking him to banks. She was taking him down to try to marry him. And we hired a private investigator, and she had done this to 2 other gentlemen. She had married them, then left. She actually had approached him in a card store walked up, bumped into him, and said, "Do we know each other?" It went from there. So ultimately, he kept coming in every week, and he was declining so quickly, and I thought, this is so bizarre. Like, I mean, it can be progressive, but it's not this progressive. So finally, we got a professional appointed, and I called the professional guardian and said, something is just not right. She went over there, and sure enough, she was drugging him and trying to take his money, and we got her removed from his life, got him into a facility. He got a new girlfriend in the facility. He was very happy, and he actually passed away about 6 months ago. He was 95 or 6 at the time, but he was very happy after that. So these are the kind of situations that I deal with. What I'll say is ways to avoid a guardianship is if you do have your advance directives in place. So for example, a power of attorney, a healthcare surrogate, and a trust. Because basically, if somebody files for guardianship, and sometimes there's people with good motives and bad motives that file for guardianship. Sometimes you'll have the actual exploiter file for guardianship to try to keep the actual family from helping the vulnerable adult out. But if you have those in place and somebody files a guardianship, the court's required to consider is this the less restrictive alternative? Is there a less restrictive alternative to a guardianship? Because you're removing someone's rights, and that's a big deal. So the court has to look at, is there a power of attorney in place or a healthcare surrogate in place and a trust in place that we can avoid having to put a guardianship in place? So if you have those advanced directives, you get to say, well, look, if I don't want a guardianship, if at all possible, I want these people. To dovetail off what Danny said, I highly encourage you to not nominate all of your children, because if you nominate 3 kids as power of attorney, and one thinks that you should be in an assisted living, one thinks you should have in-home care, one thinks the money should be spent this way, you're going to definitely be in a guardianship. And the last one I had where multiple siblings were fighting, my client ultimately got appointed, but she spent $30,000 because the 4 other kids, nobody could agree. So doing it because you think it's nice and will make them feel good, trust me, it's only going to cause strife. You need to pick one person and then a backup. When you do it's just never a good idea. And then when you get in guardianship court, the judge says, well, lots of times these people can't get along, I'm just going to appoint a professional. And there's a lot of good professional guardians, but it's more expensive to have a professional than it is to have a family member. So I encourage you to put those documents in place, particularly if you have a trust. Because in guardianship land, the guardianship court and the guardian are only going to be in charge of your individual assets. So if your assets are in trust, even if there's a guardianship, the trustee that you've nominated will be the one to manage those assets. So even if you were to decline and you needed a guardian of the person, meaning just medical and person decisions, then you could have a guardian just appointed for that purpose, and you still have the person that you wanted to manage your money, managing your money. So that's another way to go about it. Excuse me. I'll tell you another couple stories. So just to illustrate how putting these things in place can be so helpful. I had one, I'll call Sally again. Sally came in and said, I have 4 siblings, we're all really concerned about my dad. And I said, well, tell me what's happened with your dad. And she said, my mom's declining, I don't know if she can manage the situation. And so they had been married 65 years, they're sitting by the fire one day, and Dad looks over and says, I'm gonna cut you up with a machete and bury you under the house. What? So I said, well, that would be concerning to me too. And she said, well, he's forgetful, but I don't know if it's dementia, because everybody seems to associate dementia with always having, forgetfulness. But there are certain types of dementia that can exhibit in different ways, such as erratic behavior. Lewy body, it can exhibit itself you'll have some memory loss, but you'll also have some other just kind of erratic behavior. So sure enough, we filed a guardianship because that was concerning. They did declare him incapacitated partially, because when you file a guardianship, what happens is the court appoints 3 professionals. Usually it's there's a doctor, a nurse, and oftentimes a social worker. They then go and they examine the person, and there's a checklist, marry, vote, manage finances, all of those things. And they report back to the court and say, I think this person should or should not be managing this area. And then the court decides based on those reports, and you can present outside testimony, whether the person is incapacitated, and if so, to what level. And so then the process goes to the guardianship. Do we need a guardian? Is there a power of attorney? Do we need this? And if we do, who should it be? So in that case, we came into court, and sometimes it's concerning because, again, people think that incapacitated means, they're like a vegetable and they can't do anything. And that's not what it means. It means vulnerable. It can't really manage their affairs. They may be able to function socially and do all sorts of things, but just because of medical age, these things, they need somebody to come in and help them manage those areas. So again, we filed, but that turned into another, I think, $50,000 to $60,000 battle about which child was going to be guardian. Another tool you can use is a pre-need guardianship. Basically, you can designate, look, if I ever have to have a guardian, I want it to be my son. If a guardianship is filed, there is a presumption that that person, if they're fit, is going to be appointed. So that is a really good way to also avoid having your family members fight, and also to make sure the person that you want, or try to ensure the person you want appointed gets appointed. We work a lot with the Cameron Group. I asked Amy to come speak. I'll let her get into the details of what her company does. She was a CCRC administrator for 9 years. She started the Cameron Group in 1999. And classic way that we work together is I'll have a guardian or call me and say, mom needs to be in a better memory care unit, a higher level of care facility, and I will refer them over to the Cameron Group to find the right facility. And a lot of times people will call with Medicaid or planning questions, which we do help with that. Sometimes you need a lawyer, sometimes you don't. And the Cameron Group is great for situations where you really don't need legal advice, but you might need some planning advice. So we work together a lot. But just to close out before Amy comes, I will be here for Q&A. I will be in the back there. My firm does a lot of other practice areas I can tell you about. Feel free to email me, and I'm really happy that I got to come speak today. So Amy?
Hello, everybody. I am so glad to be here. What a breath of fresh air. It's really, really nice. I'm an aging life care professional. What the heck is that? I hear that all the time. I've been doing this 17 years. The profession is about 30 years old. And what I will tell you is that you don't know what you don't know. So if you think about doing your taxes, you hire a CPA. If you need to make arrangements for your passing into heaven, you make funeral arrangements. You got a law problem, you hire an attorney, and you're approaching your 80s, you hire an aging life care expert. Years ago, I usually get hired by the children, the adult children, and I drove out to the house, and Mr. and Mrs. S. were at home, and the problem child was Mrs. S. And as your fabulous pastor said, it was clear they hadn't talked about what was going to need to happen. So I walked in the room. Mrs. S was sitting in a recliner, and she was sitting like this. So I said, looks like you're mad. And instinctively, I said to her, do you think I'm here to put you in a nursing home? And she said, yes. Sometimes I feel like a weapon coming in on a part of the children to make the parents behave, right? And we sat down and did exactly what your pastor said, is talked. And so what you should know, and throughout my time with you, I'm going to ask you to write things down because I don't expect you to remember them, but I want to give you some real substantive tips. The Aging Life Care Association is the association where all the aging life care managers are listed. We're experts in aging. So what does that mean? What that means is we can help you with, if you want to stay at home, and that's what most people say to me, I want to stay at home. I do not want to leave my home. I do not want to end up in a nursing home. How can I do that? We help you figure that out. We get asked the question, should I move into a continuing care retirement community? What does that mean? What does an entrance fee mean? What's the difference between assisted living and nursing home? I tell you a myth. Medicare pays 100 days. Medicare doesn't pay 100 days in a rehab center. And people look up and say, I was told that Medicare pays 100 days in the nursing home. It's not true. They pay up to 100 days. How do you navigate that? How do you maximize the therapy you're going to get at a rehab center when you fall, break a hip, have a stroke, something happens to you in your 80s? You should buy the book, My Mother, Your Mother. It's a fabulous book if you're an adult child or if you're a parent. My Mother, Your Mother. And it outlines the philosophy of what's called slow medicine, which is really at the heart of what people want in their 80s. They want to be able to move out the rest of their life in a way that's not acute care oriented. Here's another tip. If you want to live a long, really good end of life, stay out of the hospital. Stay out. I'll teach you another tip. You can slow down all the decision making. You know, when 911's called, everybody's in a hurry, aren't they? Hurry, 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 get you in, get you to the hospital, get you to the ER, run a bunch of tests, go, 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 right? Move, move, move. The first thing you can do is slow things down. And when they start recommending tests, you could say to your children or your friends and family, if they find something in this test and I'm not going to do it, why am I going through all these tests? You can say no. So aging life care professionals help you learn how to navigate in the very complicated systems that you enter, not if you have your first event, it's when you have your first event. I hear this all the time. You know, I didn't go to a doctor until I turned 81, and all of a sudden I'm at the doctor all the time. You can manage that. I went to see a client last Friday, and he said, the biggest thing I need help with is managing my wife's medical appointments. And I looked down at the calendar, and they had 7 appointments in the month of July. Different appointments. One of those was for a mammogram, and she's 87. And I said to him, is this something you want to be doing? This is a full-time job. You can pay me a lot of money to manage these appointments, but do you really need to go to all of them? I have another guy, and I'm telling you these stories so that you can feel the kind of support you need, because the number one thing I hear, Stephanie's great. She'll say, call the Cameron group. Call, call, call. People call and they'll say, they told me to call, but I don't know why I'm calling you. I don't know what you do. And we fix problems that come as a result of what I'm going to say is unsupported anxiety for this time of life. The kids, the adult kids, and I'm one, my dad's 87, and everybody's scared. The parents are scared. They're faced with things that are unknown to them, and the kids are scared because it's a massive responsibility to be in this time of life and do it well. I got a call from my dad last summer. He has frontotemporal degeneration. It's a fancy name for confusion. He's married. I love my stepmother. They've been married a long time. And he says to me, I don't think Joe knows how to take care of me. She's 16 years younger than him. And I gasped. He said, I don't think she knows what she's doing. Well, my sister's a nurse. There's 6 of us. Well, what ended up happening was she was in the largest state of denial as to how he was doing. She didn't want to face it. She loves my dad. She didn't want these things to be happening. And that happens a lot. I had a mentor of mine that said, you ought to tell your clients, reality's not that bad if you face it. I've worked with older adults my entire career. When I was 13 years old, I walked into a nursing home, and it was the most honest and real place I'd been. It was so real. I remember a woman telling me, I was volunteering in activities, and I said, do you want to go to bingo? And she said, I really want to die. And I said, well, if you're not going to die in the next hour, will you play bingo till that happens? We got along so well. Oh, you're always just, slap me. Oh, and I walked her down. And it's a very refreshing time of life. And aging life care professionals can help you learn and maximize that time. And the other tip I will tell you, if you're going to plan for anything, plan for when you need a little bit of care. Just a little bit of care. What was said earlier is really right. People don't do anything until they need a lot of care. And assisted living, whether you have assisted living at home, which you can do, or assisted living in a community, which you can do, that piece is financially the most important place for you to make sure you can afford. And to get help, and this is, if parents, if you make one mistake, this is a very consistent mistake, is to pay for help before you think you need it. Because most of the time, you don't think you need it. And it's hard to start spending the money that you've saved for this time of life. That's a hard thing to do. Marty Salt, the Channel 9 former news anchor, and now she's a special reporter, did a story called Blindsided. Go to Channel 9 website and watch the 2-part series. Each part is 30 minutes long. Blindsided, Marty Salt. It will give you some extra information that you'll need related to the 80-something time in your life. I'm proud of your church. I'm proud of what you guys are doing. I love the message that we started with. And I wish you well in the journey that you're about to embark on, some of you. Thank you.